Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do and how we do it at officehours.global. First hour is a general discussion, anything related to media or virtual production we discuss here. Second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. It's Monday here in Labor Day, so we're going to just have a second hour of questions, which we are always able to generate. So tomorrow we're going to talk about mic placement. We talk a lot about mics, but where you put them is important too. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We had a request to talk about advertising. With everything changing, where's it going? What marketing, advertising, what's the future of that? So we're going to talk about that on Wednesday. We're going to talk about working with talent on Thursday. We talked about working with clients, but working with talent and working with clients are different. We're going to talk about that on Thursday. And then macro.ai is going to be, we're going to have the co-founder and CEO Ankith Harathi join us and talk about macro AI. They call it the Zoom client for creatives. And so there's a lot of interesting ways of handling Zoom. So we're going to check that out. And then, of course, Saturday is the long day. We have education at 8 o'clock. We're not streaming that, so you have to be here for that. It's incredible conversation about education and technology. And then at 10 o'clock, Nick Justin's back, and we're going to be talking about meta-humans. It's a shorter long day than the last one. We went a little overboard last Saturday. So let's jump into the questions. Bill?
Absolutely. James Brooks comes up first this morning from New York, and he says, what is the next piece of kit you're considering changing? Thanks.
Go ahead, Jason.
I've been doing a lot of changing recently. I'm playing around with the way that I have to in the new studio balance and set up and configure my lights, and I'm working on eye lines and camera angles. So just a whole lot of grips.
Go ahead. David.
M1X Mac Mini.
There you go. Ken.
Believe it or not, my Ursa Mini to the 12K.
When are you going to get the 12K? Are you going to get it soon?
It'll be sooner than I had anticipated because of the price drop. And I've just got a couple of client jobs which are going to be paying for them.
Nice, very good. Courtney?
I'm thinking about getting one of these chewy 11.6 touchscreens as a second computer that I can have off to the side for logging in as a second person or handling overflow and things like that. They're about $360 and they're HD.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
First of all, we don't change equipment. We just add more equipment. And for me, it's I'm building. Yeah, for me, I'm building new home kits. So I'm working on cameras right now and trying to figure out what's the best camera for a small system with a teleprompter.
That's great. All right, next question.
Next question comes to us from Rotem Kish in Makit Batia in Israel. And he says, for all teleprompter users, what software do you use to move the feed to the screen and flip the image?
Go ahead, David.
So I actually have a second computer a second monitor, and then I use a Teleprompter Premium Plus, which allows me to throw my prompter up there. The screen itself does the mirroring, but what I love about this app is that you can have a transparent background, so I can still see my Zoom participants or my feed or whatever I'm setting out with the text on top of it.
Go ahead, Rupert.
Yeah, so for software solutions to flip the image, you can do it with NDI. Actually, you can create an NDI output and then use NDI monitor on your teleprompter and then open that up and it has a flip option in it. You can do essentially the same thing with OBS or vMix. You can create a scene and output that and then flip that output. On Windows, there's a third-party application called Ultramon you can get that will flip and mirror a second display. And you can also do it in software on Linux. So if you want to hook up a Raspberry Pi to that, you can do it that way. But plus one on David's point of having at least a notepad surface with a transparent background. I'm actually using that with Notepad++ on my prompter, so I can set that to half transparent, put it right over my speaker, and just type in my notes as I see fit.
Jason?
Both of my teleprompters are using auto reversing monitors, but telepromptermirror.com/software, which I'll put into Mukana, is a pretty good collection if you need to do this with software. I just don't have the patience for it.
Go ahead, Courtney.
I use monitors that can invert. Here's some from Yo-Yo. They make security monitors and they're not that high a resolution, but they're designed for teleprompters and they take all types of inputs and they support inversion in both directions. And if you don't use that, then you could use a MDHX as an external piece of hardware that will do image reverse, and it also converts to SDI if you should need it in the field.
All right, go ahead, Jeffrey.
So working on PC, I have it's in the Microsoft Store. It's Teleprompter Pro, and the reason why I use it is because in this case, I have a monitor behind the camera, so I can resize the window and put it as close to the camera lens as possible, so I can read and I can go. And you can also do other things like overlay. Like for instance, I could overlay Alex into that and then have the text rolling over that, so I could be looking at Alex and reading as well.
Yeah, we use Presentation Prompter Plus, I think, is the one that we use for most of the stuff that we're doing. It'll allow you to flip and do all the other bits and pieces on the Mac. Then, of course, like Courtney said, we use the decimators all the time, almost all the time, because it'll convert a lot of times before the Atem Mini, which we now oftentimes put into that pipeline. We want to be able to switch back and forth between a Interatron experience and a teleprompt experience. And so we used to have the Atem production switchers, and they were only SDI. And so we use the HX to both convert to HDMI to the monitor as well as flip the image. But it's nice having a switcher. It's a great use of a Atem Mini, is just to be able to swap back and forth between, okay, now you want to talk to people, but now you want to do now they want teleprompter. Works really well. Next question.
Comes from Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas, and here on the panel. What's the oldest piece of technology currently in use in your setup?
Go ahead, Peter.
It is a 2014 Mac Mini server, which you remember that was that period of time when they actually issued a server version of the Mac Mini. And that is my home server. It's what my network attacks, well, actually my SAN is attached to, if you will, and then everything else in the house talks to that.
Courtney?
I don't have it hooked up today, but I did start office hours using my Sept MK41 with a CMC4 amplifier on it, which I bought in 1978. So that's got to be the oldest.
It might be the oldest of anybody
I've used here on the panel.
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
This Heil PR40 is probably 11 years old. I've got an Alesis compressor down here in a rack, a 3836, I want to say, that classic Alesis compressor, and an Allen & Heath Z14 that are all, I don't know, 15, 20 years old.
Yeah, Jeffrey.
So a few different things. Lights, I run the Neewer lights. And one of my oldest Neewer lights is actually the hair light, because it's the small camera light, and I can put it up on the wall. Other than that, a couple monitors that I've had for a very long time that go 1080p. Like for instance, the monitor I use to screen scrape, so I show off a product every now and then. And then for storage, I think my Drobo is pretty old right now. I think I got that in 2010. So it's time to do some NAS updating.
Ken?
Yeah, first I just thought I was going to be my 2016 iPad. Then I realized I've got this 20-year-old mic, this Neumann, I should say. Then I realized I can put Nikon lenses onto my Ursa, and I was about to test this 1970 f1.2 Nikon lens, and that will be then the oldest piece of kit in my chain.
I think all of us have to build something like Ken, where it just feels like there must be shelving just like hanging all the way around him. We just have to, to build something. I can grab this and I can grab this. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I thought I was going to be old with my Neumann, but it seems to be microphones and, to me, microphones and grip gear, which is the hardware, are the things that last the longest and are always the best investments. If you can buy good quality microphones and good quality grip gear, that can take 40, 50 years, and they're still as good as they were the day you bought them.
I think the oldest thing that I have here is probably this mic. Just like Jason, I've had this Heil probably since 2007 or 8, something like that. As far as the gear that I'm actually using, I have a Pix 240 that I use that's probably 10 years old. That was it was like the first run of them coming out, that I still use for records, for screen records. And then the oldest thing I have in my studio is I have a Zonophone sitting over here just outside of frame. That's 1908. so that's what I have. I don't have any records for it right now. So that's the oldest piece of equipment sitting in my studio. All right, next question.
Tony Mobley of Newman, Georgia. Noonan, I'd be pronouncing that wrong. On conversations with Tony Mobley last Wednesday, porn links were placed in the YouTube chat. They were reported and deleted. What should be done going forward?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Technically, the best thing to do is not use the YouTube chat, but there are settings inside the YouTube chat that we can set to kind of counter that. But there's only so much you can do.
Go ahead, Leo.
So the positive of this is that you don't seem to attract this until you're actually getting a lot of traffic. So that's a positive point of view. And in a lot of cases, you attract these things because you're busy, and and they go to these things. It's normally links. The links are actually obfuscated, so they don't actually say something that you can easily spot. They don't. The days of putting in rude words have gone because they all get immediately blocked out. There are actually 2 types of chat on to YouTube, which is important to know. One is the live chat that you get when your event is live, and you can actually say whether that carries on. So if you want to put in things like questions, still carry on questions, you can put that in the live chat. And you can also say that the live chat can't be fast, so people can actually can't flood it that way. But the longer term stuff, you end up having to police it. And a lot of people who run social media sites realize they have to police these things if they want people to be able to comment and then tell others to watch.
Yeah. YouTube comments. That's all I got to say. Almost all of our clients just turn them off. Like, it's just not worth having the interaction because it's so bad. So it's just welcome to the little hell that a lot of us live in. Next question.
Often Office Powers panelist Guy Cochran from Seattle is up next, and he says, what's the difference between RTMP and SRT?
Interestingly enough, both of these are basically, they are protocols that can be used for a lot of things other than video. So I believe, we'll see if I can, I believe that the short RTMP, I believe, is real-time media protocol, I think. It's a test. If it's a test, I might have failed it. And SRT is, I think, secure, reliable.
Real-time messaging protocol.
Protocol, yeah. Because it's not media. That's right. Because both of these can take a lot of other things other than media, but past it. Now, I'm not going to get into too much of the. I'm out of my space to try to explain the differences. Other than one is an actual streaming protocol, the RTMP, whereas SRT is moving packets, and I believe it's a UDP based. Transport, and so it's a slightly different with error correction, but better error correction than FEC, forward error correction, but not as good as XC. So we probably need to have a whole second hour about transports, and I'm not the one to answer those completely. So I know a lot about HLS, so that's what most of my life lives in. Next question.
Guy is right back from Seattle with H265 to YouTube. How?
Welcome to HLS. So anyway, so what you need to do to go to H265 to YouTube is it's an HLS transport that has to be done. And so you go into I have to go back and look at it because once I set it up, I didn't have to think about it again. But you can set it up as a HLS ingest inside of the YouTube event, and then from there, it's going to give you a place to send, to push your HLS segments to for your encoder. Little note is that the way the protocol works for YouTube and the way Elemental thinks it works, or AWS, different. so if you actually cut and paste the HLS address from YouTube into Media Live, you will not get a stream. You have to go through and and hack the code. And I don't have it right in front of me. I can't show it to you right now, but you have to hack the code. And if you ping me on Discord, I can show it to you, and maybe we'll do a thing about it I've been meaning to show it once we got things going, because we're going to use the H.265 into YouTube for Office Hours 2.0. And so as that goes, we'll show it, but I can do I'll do some little lab on it at some point. But it took I would love to save you a couple days that it took me to figure out, and a lot of back and forth with some folks to figure out what was different in the nomenclature. But the nomenclature inside of Media Live is different than the nomenclature inside of YouTube, and so you can't just cut and paste one and the other. You have to edit the XML. so anyway, I will ping me in Discord and we'll talk about it, and I'll try to make a little movie about it at some point too. Next question.
James Brooks in New York is up next. He said, outside of tech, what are the panelists' other hobbies and interests, and how do you balance them? Thanks.
Go ahead, David.
Well, in my other life, I am the rock and roll rabbi, so I love me some God and I love me some guitar.
Nice. John?
You guys already know this, so I have two hobbies. Rocketry is one. Here's the rocket that we're building in the garage right now, and then here is the motor that goes in said rocket. It's an M-class motor. It's 4-inch diameter and about 30 inches in length. And then also I do foosball. I'm a professional foosball player. I won the U.S. Open in 1990.
Nice. Ken?
Cycling. I haven't done as much this year as I normally would like to. So mountain biking I do in the mornings. So that's the only way I can fit it in, is get up at dawn, do about an hour and a half of mountain biking, and then get ready for after hours.
That's great. Jeffrey?
Yeah, for me, it's music and mostly drums. And the best part about electronic drums is now I can get up in the morning and at 6 a.m. start playing some songs, and doesn't really bother the house, and put it into my workout. The other thing I've just gotten into the last couple of months is 3D printing, and both of them I've incorporated is so you can actually watch when I do some 3D printing. You can watch it anywhere on my channel, and every now and then I'll throw it up on after hours so people can watch the prints go.
Go ahead, Courtney.
I was going to say 3D printing. My problem is I've turned all of my hobbies into professions. So everything that I was interested in, I managed to make a living at. So I'm looking for some new hobbies now that I'm retired.
I think for non-tech, or as close as I get to non-tech, would be cooking. And I keep on getting more and more analog with it. So like literally yesterday I was researching like how much wheat do I need to plant to get enough flour to last, X number of months at the house. And I think I can fit it in the lower yard. so I'm kind of slowly going, my big plan is to slowly move from tech back into farming by the time I'm 70. So I got 20 years of just slowly adding one piece at a time before I'm back, because then I can end the way I started. so anyway, I spent 20 years, hopefully 20 years, 70 to 90, just farming in my backyard. All right. Anyway, that's my big plan. Next question.
Next question comes to us from Guy Cochran in Seattle, who's back with, how did Todd's setup of the Belfast method differ from Richard's?
Jim?
Yeah, so for one thing, we changed out the site-to-site VPN to Meraki Z3s for this show. It was a little simpler from a remote access perspective, since it was predominantly site-to-site to me and a single remote access VPN for Marcus. But one thing we did add was we added a streaming bridge on site, and Tlaloc was able to send in a feed and use the audio return from Unity to drive some animations, and then that was in turn overlaid onto Todd's video. So technically those were the additions, and we're doing a fair amount of tweaking on that to give Tlaloc a direct Unity Connect feed to get higher definition audio to make that visualization process work better. And we're doing quite a bit of re-engineering on the ducking on the BSS. I guess that's the other additional pieces. We did have BSS involved in that communication for ducking, and we needed to do some tweaking. So that was done yesterday. It was a busy day yesterday.
Is it the 806 that you're using?
Yes. Yeah. And so the 806 is here with me. As is the Unity Intercom and Unity Connect. Yeah.
By the way, I shouldn't say this on YouTube because it'll ruin everything for me. But we buy a lot of the BSSs we buy them on eBay. They just show up, and buying them in retail is really expensive. Buying them in eBay is, when because we were buying them at about $1,500 to $2,000 each, and they all work. They're sitting in some server room, and but I probably ruined it now because I sit there and I'm just constantly. As soon as one comes up, we're like, buy it, just get another one. So
and they're gone.
Yeah, exactly. I just ruined everything. Next question.
Cherry Cheetah of Dallas, Texas says, I've noticed a difference in stream latency to YouTube when I stream at 29.97 versus 30 frames per second. 30 frames per second cuts down the latency by a lot. Is this expected behavior?
I've never noticed that it was a different, but maybe we just didn't pay much attention to it. We set our encoders to 30 frames per second because that's what YouTube does. YouTube is at 30 frames per second. It doesn't matter what you send. If you send it 23.8, it's 30. If you send it 25, it's 30. Now, if you set it for 60, and I think if you set it for 60 and you send 50, it's 60. So but generally anything close to 30 will be 30 no matter what. And so it does probably go through an extra correction. I didn't know that there was a difference between 29.97 and 30, but I haven't done, I think I've done 30 to, and we run our entire system at 29.97, but the encoders, our elementals just are set to 30 on the way out. So they just do that last little push out to it. I didn't realize that it would change the latency, which I find fascinating. But I will admit that if it's under 22 seconds, I don't care. Like it's somewhere under there, it's sure. Sounds great. So I don't notice it that much. So that's an interesting puzzle. But it is important for people to know when they stream. Like there's a lot of people that are like filmmakers that want to do 23.98. And we're just like, you're just letting YouTube servers just put frames in between your frames. Like just in case you're wondering, like it's not a good solution for that process. Same with 25. Now, the post video should be the frame rate that you sent it. So if you care about that, then it could be the same frame rate. But generally, Facebook and YouTube and I think Twitter and I believe LinkedIn all conform to 30 frames a second. Next question.
Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas is up next from here in the panel. Does the panel have any experience with dual SIM phones, and what have been your use case pros and cons?
Go ahead, Jason.
Sure. I've used dual SIM phones, and basically everyone who has a somewhat modern iPhone actually has a dual SIM phone. The smaller ones, of course, having an electronic and a physical, and the larger ones the larger and more recent ones having the option for dual and both and either. The good use case is for let's say you're locked into a family plan and you can't mess with your data. You can actually just sign up for something else, Google Fi, if you've got good coverage, put that in and add an extraneous data plan and just kind of use it seamlessly. Of course, the most common use case is in places like India where there are so many carriers that you absolutely need more than one. So, those are my thoughts.
Next question.
Tommy Shantz of St. Paul, Minnesota is up next. He says, Isadora, Zoom OSC, ISO, what is the order of importance of knowledge in these to be of service in office hours with an emphasis in audio? What other programs would be helpful?
Go ahead, George.
Order of importance, Zoom OSC, and obviously ISO. I would also learn audio hijack and loopback will help facilitate audio for right now. Also, if you have a alternate dongle attached to your system, that could help push audio across the network also, and I've tested that this weekend.
I think that the skill set that is probably the most rare, which we're going to go after soon, is Isadora. Where we don't have a lot of people that know Isadora very well. We have a handful of people that know it really well, and that's what's but everything that we're doing for Office Hours 2.0 is all like Isadora is kind of the core of that thought process. So it's pretty important to what we're doing. And Andy's building some just genius solutions. And I think that I actually don't know it that well either. So we're going to get Mark to come on and we'll do some labs on Saturdays soon with Isadora to get more of us up to speed, because I think it's a pretty important application. Next question.
Jim Hankins here on the panel from Chesterfield, Michigan says, any recommendations from the panel for a portable rack case of at least 9 rack units? I don't plan on shipping, but going back and forth from local locations, he says, and maybe a Pelican Blackbox. Thoughts?
George.
So Jim, I'm a big fan of SKB, and action you shall receive. This is a 9U. All my racks for the road cases for rack up is SKB, so it's a good option.
Good, John.
I moved from SKB to Gator, and I use the rollers. So the one right behind me, right here in green, is an 8U, but it's got a handle and wheels on it, which is super convenient.
Sorry, I got lost in my panels here. Go ahead, Courtney.
I also have switched to Gator for local travel because they're so much lighter. The ones that use this blow molded ABS or whatever it is, as opposed to the molded polyethylene, which I think is the one that Preto was showing there. I would not throw them onto an airplane, but for traveling around in your own van or truck, I think they work great. Just don't drop them off a cargo belt onto the concrete.
Go ahead, Jason.
Wow, this is practically consensus. I'm going to leave it to Alex to go with the, turn to 11. But if you're not taking it on a plane, you're not going to be stacking it, and you can treat it with a modicum of respect. I absolutely use Gator cases too. I've moved away from the really heavy stuff unless I'm actually having to, take it in a place where it's going to be out of my control.
Yeah, the one that we got into using a lot for these types of things are the SKB fly racks. So the fly racks basically are the metal enclosure that you have inside the rack, but then they slide inside of a case. And what we liked about them was we could fly with them, and that's what we did a lot of. But we could pull them out and set them down, and they were just the frame, And then what's really nice about that is that the airflow is very good because they're not in a frame. And so what we would do is we'd actually take when we used to do these kinds of things, we could stack a bunch of them up on top of each other and then use a cinch to basically pull them all into one big rack when we were shipping. When we do things locally, I admit that by the time I finished Pixel Core, which is the last time I was really doing a lot of roll-ins, we had moved to standing rolling cases. So, because we just put more stuff in it. You just keep adding things to it. And so we would really go to 22U rolling cases. And then we would either in a Dodge Caravan, you can rock them backwards, so that they're face up very, very gently, and put them in there. And then we also had Ford Transits with lift gates on the back, which makes it so much easier. All right, next question.
Stuart Fairweather, who is not here on the panel today, often is, from Melbourne, Australia, says, when looking for work, what job title are employers giving to the person hosting and cutting their corporate meetings?
Jason?
I've heard show caller. I've also heard MC, because that's just kind of generally what people think it is, even if it isn't.
Yeah, I think we've been calling them technical producers because they're for a lot of these smaller shows, it's all kind of a one person. So in the early days of COVID, before we really started building up, I was doing lots of these little shows, and I would be using like Mimo Live for play out and a couple little countdown clocks and things like that. I didn't really show up in the event, but I was still talking to everyone in the back end, and we'd be prepping people and so on and so forth. But we called that a technical producer, and I don't know if there's any official name for that. Next question.
I'd be concerned if people say, are you the show's TP? Danny Law of Malaysia is up next, and he said, which SSD is recommended for external USB-C enclosure to record ISO feeds from Atem Mini Extreme, and also possibly to use in a separate occasion to record from Blackmagic Design cameras directly?
Go ahead, George.
I know you asked about enclosures, so I would prefer to go to OWC. For the OWC, the external, if you just want to use it for external other uses, it's a good idea. But for the ISOs, I find that the T5 and the T7s is the best way to go, and that's what Blackmagic recommends. So I would stick with the Samsung 5 and 7 for the ISO, and then you could try the OWC enclosures for externals.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, I can't speak for the camera, but for my Atem Mini, I have the OWC Mercury Elite, which is right here. It's a dual drive. You can put in 2 SSDs. You could RAID it. You could stripe it. You could just go drive to drive, and the Atem Mini will see both the drives. You could choose which one you want to go to. It will fail over to the next one if it fills up, and it works really well with an optical USB cable. I've done that many times. So if you could have it completely away from your Atem Mini and do some recording there.
Go ahead, Jason.
Well, I've never seen something I can't overdo, so I tend to actually use a full rack mount to do this when I can. Blackmagic makes this, and it will allow you to use off the shelf. I do not love the T7s, but the T5s work very well. I've had the same problem that Alex has had, and with a long record, something about that buffer is just wrong. But if you really want a perfect list, go to blackmagic.com/support. They have a very specific list for everything and exactly what's supported under exactly which conditions.
Yeah, we typically use T5s for almost everything. The T7s, again, we had some issues with the camera specifically, but we stopped using them. We use them for backups, and we back up T5s up to the T7s, but we don't use the T7s, in production because of early issues that we had. As far as SSDs, I use the Samsungs. I think the 960s, I think, are the ones that we use currently. I think they're 960s. What we don't use is SanDisk's SSDs because they had a read-write issue with HyperDecks, for quite some time. It caused a lot of pain. And usually when you're in production, you get a lot of pain. You're like, I'm never using that again. And then you never do.
They fixed that, but
I
I'm
know
with
they
you.
fixed it, but I have, if you need some SanDisk SSDs, I've got a stack of them. All right, next question.
Next question comes from Rupert McRae in Dallas. He says, MXL Microphones is amongst the sponsors of Zoomtopia 2021. What are your thoughts on MXL Microphones and what value might be found in the MXL-Zoomtopia sponsorship?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So we're talking about old equipment. This was the first microphone I used when I started podcasting because I had it for my drums. This is it's basically the 990 991 combo. So this is the 990. 991's a little pin style microphone that you use for hi-hats. And as for the sound, it works really well. It's a low price. The pack was like under $100 when I bought it. And I use this, I'll pull this out every now and then if I want to mic up a guitar cab or anything like that. As for the Zoomtopia sponsorship, MXL's probably just wants to get in the forefront and sell some microphones. And the quality is pretty decent for what we're doing here.
Go ahead, Bill.
It seems to me that brands come up in eras because they solve a problem that the traditional manufacturers aren't solving. There are 10 or 15 names in traditional microphones. They're still at the high end. You've got Neumann, Sony, NAB, just a bunch, AKG. There's a lot of traditional manufacturers. I don't think they saw this switch over to desktop chip processed sound coming as fast as some of these smaller, more agile companies. So there was a place in the marketplace. I figured out, I first heard about MXL for their little MicMate plug-in, plug it into the bottom of a microphone and it'll turn it into USB quickly. Did it sound fabulous? No. But was it incredibly workable and affordable and simple? And did it solve a problem? Yes. So I think they are investing their success in continually getting new products that serve niches that the big manufacturers didn't serve. And so I feel pretty good about them. I think they're investing and coming along, and I think they're a great match for the kind of person who will be doing webcasting and be interested in Zoomtopia.
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
Dollar for dollar, I think that they're a decent active microphone. The minute you're spending what the decent ones cost, though, I would immediately go to one of these. My feeling is that I'm just so anti-condenser in any place where you can't treat the room that it's a fine mic, and it's one that I won't use again.
Courtney?
I think they make a pretty good pedestrian, large diaphragm condenser. This is an Apex 435, so they're very similar to this. It's a large diaphragm FET head condenser, and I got one over here. This is $100 microphone, so sorry about that. Yeah, 99.95, and a lot of these are all Chinese made, and they all sound pretty good. They're pretty low noise, so you don't have too much of a problem with self noise on them, and they're pretty clean sounding for the price. I think they're all right.
Next question.
Jasmine Lee in Singapore is up next with, is using a flat Cat 6 cable for connecting an M1 Mac Mini to an internet router over 25 meters a good idea? I can't fit a regular cable under my door.
Go ahead, Ken.
Yes. Well, with my experience, I've had no issue. I've run it when I in the garden, the 25-meter flat Cat 6 cable, not an issue.
Leo.
So the flat Cat 6 cables are really good for putting under carpets or in there. Just be aware they're not great for moving. They're not designed to be touched or moved around a lot. I find they will. They're not happy with it. But if you buy one and they are built with the ends on already, as long as they're not played around with, they're rated to do what they're supposed to do, so they will work.
Rupert.
They do usually work. I mean, I look at some of these flat cables, it's a bit of a minefield. And sometimes you look at them from an engineering perspective and you think, how can that possibly meet the spec of the actual cable? Having said that, you may not always need to, if you need to get under a door or something, I know sometimes you've got to do it. Doesn't mean that whole cable has to be flat. You could get a decent cable as far as you can and maybe hop through a switch or something like that. You don't have to have the whole cable flat if you don't need to. But just keep in mind, if you're putting it under anything, carpet, especially flat cables, you're just going to get wear. And they are using cables in that way. It just makes them inherently more susceptible to getting worn spots on them.
Alan.
And I'm the same as everybody else who has experience, so Ken and that. I currently run one, a 30-meter one, and there's no difference between the 30-meter non-flat cable I used to have going through the place. I just need to be able to get through a very thin bit of wall, and yeah, it's fine.
Next question.
Stuart Fisher of Würzburg, Germany, up next with, what wireless solution do you recommend that can do both directions, monitoring and microphone in one device? And the use case is a DPA headset.
Well, there's the DPA headset. That's the only one that I know of. I mean, there's another company called Boom, not in high quality. I mean, it is high quality, but it's not the same kind of high quality. There's a company called the Boom, and they make a one that has both in-ear as well as a noise canceling. Now, these are the folks that make like the microphone for like an Apache helicopter. So what's great about the Boom is that you can, I used to have a convertible. I could have my convertible opened on a phone call and people thought I was in my office. So it was really good as far as noise cancellation goes. It's not the highest quality as far as audio quality there, but it worked extremely well. It was just a little thin, because that's what it's doing. But it has in-ears built in. Then the DPA is the only one that I know of that builds the entire thing into the microphone as well as the earpiece. I tend to like to keep it separate because I want the best of each one, of whatever I need. So I'd rather have a DPA or a Countryman as one thing, and then I'm using now the B-Link or the Bubble B, not the B-Link by Courtney, but the Bubble B earpieces. But I also have Ear Heroes. I have other things, and so I want to keep those things separate for a variety of reasons. The thing that goes bad the most is the ears. And so because you get earwax in them over time. And so the things that become problematic, you want to swap those out. You don't want it connected to the expensive microphone that you have. Go ahead, Peter.
Well, I'm just wondering if we're actually answering the intended question, because I have the same kind of question. What is the wireless component of that?
Well, the only wireless component I have that we've used in the past is the Shure Microflex. So the Shure Microflex will have, it is not the cheapest solution, but it's all in one, and it's super compact and it's super easy to use. So if you're really into audio, you will hear the quantization of the bits. Like I can hear it when it's turned really up high and I'm listening to it in a general use purpose, because it's using the DECT format platform. Or protocol, so it's the same as like your Free Speaks and your Plantronics, and so if you have one place you can't use it is Plantronics. So anyway, I was talking to the Shure rep, and he's like, "There's one building that you can't use it in, it's Plantronics." So but what's great about the Microflex is that it's super easy to set up. You literally have this little charger station. You put all your mics into it, and you hit a button, and it just resets them all to 1 to 8. It's all Dante. It's got a little receiver, just an Ethernet cable to the transceiver, and you're done. It does 2 channels. Well, the larger one that we had has 2 channels of IFB, so that you can route to any of the little packs. As well as up to 8 channels of, well, we can do more, but we had 8 channels of wireless belt packs. But you can also switch. You can have some of them be podium mics, some of them be handhelds. All of those things are all interchangeable, and again, can just be reallocated. But specifically, the wireless belt packs have a headphone out, and they have a TA4 in, and so you can just plug your mic into that. You can plug your headphone into that, and it'll just work. And it's, oh my gosh, it's so great. Like, we use them for comms, it was just, it's like really simple. Like, I need to, for stage managers and stuff like that, we just gave them another channel of that. So as an all-in-one, it's great. Let's go to the next question.
Moving to Morgan Price in Victoria, British Columbia. People are recommending the pluggable dual-link HDMI adapter for Zoom pins. Does anyone on the panel have experience with the adapter and exporting key fill to an Atem Mini Extreme?
Go ahead, Courtney.
I do not have experience using it for, this is an older one, pluggable, USB 3 to multiple, dual link. This one has HDMI and either HDMI or DVI on it. The problem is it uses the dual link drivers, which is kind of a virtual video card. So it doesn't really do any kind of acceleration. So if you're trying to play back anything on that monitor that requires H.264 decoding, like 4K or something, you're going to run into trouble. But for 1080p, it should probably be okay with most stuff. I wouldn't try and do any gaming scraped off. And as far as using it to the Atem as a key fill, I don't think, well, I guess it does. You do have access to both of those monitor outs, so you could send a key and a fill, but I've never tried it.
I think Fenwick was playing with that, so hopefully he'll come back and give us a report, but I think he was playing with the idea. Peter?
After talking to Fenwick, I actually have 2 of them hooked up to my M1 and have them feeding actually 4K, native 4K into my DeckLink quad card on the Mac Pro, and yes, I can do key fill.
And you've done it? You've done a key fill out of it?
Mm-hmm.
What software is sending the key fill?
I'm assuming maybe I'm not doing it right, because I was just using it's not PowerPoint.
Keynote?
Keynote.
No, Keynote can't do key fill though.
Okay.
But Memo Live probably could, so it'd be a matter of figuring that out.
I can do that. I have Memo Live on my M1 as well. So
try that. You have to try that.
I will.
Yep, absolutely. Next question.
Moving on, we get to Stuart Fairweather of Melbourne, Australia, and Stuart asks, does anyone know of a UVC-enabled Android app, camera via USB, that also has RTSP, RTMP output?
Alan?
Yeah, well, there is one. It is, let me just show you, it's Camerafy. However, if you're using Android 10, as we can see here, it's no longer, Android 10 no longer supports it as of June last year. So if you're on version 9 or below, you should be fine with the Camerafy app. It's one I've used in the past, not for several years now, but I did use it with great success. However, current ones, any of the new ones on Android 10 won't actually support it, unfortunately.
Next question.
Roger Harmon in Tucson, Arizona says, PrimeMeet, is it a worthy opponent to Zoom?
I don't think we know enough about it. I will say that the fact that their website is gumreviews.com/PrimeMeet is probably not a good start. If you're going to build something that's going to be an up and comer, you should probably have a good URL. That's a little I don't quite understand the process there. So it could be. I mean, I think that the website looks really nice. So it looks like they spent some time on it. So we'll see. Maybe some of us can jump on it and play with it a little bit and come back and let us know. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's back with Jason Seipp has mentioned introducing an office hours like Q&A period into his classes. Could the Mukana engine be useful for K through 12 with appropriate modifications?
Yeah, we're actually working on that modification specifically to solve problems like Jason's. The issue we have is there's just a lot of legal regulations about how we manage data with kids. And so that's the part that we're just working through. There's nothing, we agree with all those things. We just don't have them built in so that they fit the requirement of the legal pieces. So we're working through that. Once we have that done, it'll be very useful for a lot of things that are like that. Next question.
Liberty White in Atlanta says, what's a good boom arm or mounting system for a Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K Pro in a small space?
Go ahead, David.
I'm a big fan of the Manfrotto line of arms. This is the variable friction arm. It pretty much can hold just about anything, and it comes with this incredibly beefy clamp that will just attach to just about anything.
Yep. Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, I am now a big proponent of the iFootage Spider Crab arms. They are unbelievably great compared to all the other kind of magic arms that I have. The mounting system is what's really, really good about it. It's very easy it's the way that they clip in together. So highly recommend the iFootage Spider Crab magic arms.
Go ahead, Bill.
My advice would be don't cheap out on your mounting stuff. The Blackmagic Pocket Cinema cameras are heavier and larger than they look if you're just ordering one out of a catalog or something like that. They're going to put some strain on the system wherever you mount it, and particularly if there are people around it. Not only go with the bigger stuff, and David gave you a good example of the standard Manfrotto serious kind of grip gear, but also make sure you have some kind of safety cable on it, because that falling on somebody would not be a pleasant thing at all.
And get the cage. Cage makes it a lot easier. So there's a cage for it if you haven't gotten it already. I think small rig, I think, is the one that I have. Yeah, I have a small rig cages, because what it does, it takes a lot of pressure off of your Manfrotto. I use the Manfrotto magic arm as well. And what it means is that, I don't have to mount it from the bottom. I can mount it from the side. I can mount it from the top. I can mount it from and it's just a great system. The new one for the Pro is also great because it takes the little T5s. You can just slide them right into the cage. It's awesome. All right, next question.
Dan Huber in Erie, Pennsylvania is up next with, is it possible to share an Atmos audio source into a Zoom meeting? I'd like to see office hours do a deep dive on select Atmos audio recordings.
Go ahead, Jason.
Unless Atmos actually has a device called the Atmos Audio, I don't really know how to answer this other than as long as you have a de-embedder and it can be seen by a computer, then of course it can be routed immediately in. Can someone give me a little bit more insight on this one?
Yeah, so you can, and Mickey's done some experiments, you can do binaural. So the binaural will come as the left and right, and it'll actually feed into it. And Mickey had stuff going around us one morning. so it can be done. Of course, we ran into the issues that we've seen in the past where if someone dials in, if the phones dial in, then we lose stereo. So if a phone attaches to a meeting, we've learned that it loses stereo, which means you'll lose binaural, which means you'll lose any kind of effect. So I think that there are ways to fold it down into that. There's no way to get true Atmos into it. One of the things that we're looking at is the new app that when we start putting stuff out, we will actually be able to stream in Atmos eventually. And so when we do that, then we can have really detailed discussions. It probably will only work on tvOS and iOS, because life is too short to try to get it to work on everything else. like I do. That's part of my job, and I until the other platforms invest in the licensing that's required to make this work correctly, we're not going to support them. I'm not going to do backflips because Microsoft is not paying for what they need to pay for this to work. So anyway, that's fundamentally the issue, is that the other platforms are very difficult to work with because they're not doing what they need to do that. So it'll be iOS and tvOS probably only, and Mac OS on Safari. Next question.
Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas, back in, this time making SDI and Ethernet cables is often discussed, but what are some more exotic cable and connector types you're willing and prepared to make and test yourself on a regular basis?
Go, Jason.
I wouldn't say the cables that I make are exotic. I personally despise Ethernet cables. I do not have the patience to terminate them. You know, if it's a punch down jack, sure, that's easy. But, you know, getting those ends, monoprice. They seem to work really well. You can order twice as many as you need, and you're always going to get what you need. What I've been doing recently in the new studio is I have a cable comb, and I've, you know, started making SDI braids and putting them up and across the ceiling, and that's been very, very handy.
You said a cable comb?
Oh, a cable comb, Alex. Yes.
What a cable comb is.
So there are a lot of them, but effectively what it allows you to do is to snap cables in and then pull it through, and it's exactly what you think it is. It will comb through and allow you to segment and braid new things in.
How did I know that this exists?
I'll send it. I'll send you. I've bought all of them. I'll send you a link on Discord.
Dag nabbit. All right.
Is this the cable comb?
That's one of my favorites. Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead, Courtney.
About the smallest connector is a TA3, TA4 Mini XLR. I'll be willing to solder. I will not solder up my own cables for Fisher or Limo connectors, especially the ones that have 9 connectors and something that's about a 1/4 inch in diameter. Those are almost impossible to solder. Of course, XLR audio cables I'm willing to do all day. That's not a problem. But the Mini XLRs, A4Ms, I draw the line at the 4 conductor tiny ones.
Go ahead, Alan.
And for me, the one I do all the time, or I certainly have done, is the Soccerpex spiders, which for breakout of your AC, and I've done so many of these over the years, especially when I was doing the warehouse stuff.
Yeah, one of my first jobs was soldering into D25s. so I can literally sit there and just listen to music and just sit there, and it's very, very, I find it very relaxing. I haven't had to do it probably for 25 years, but it was when I did it for days, and it was I don't know, there's something about it that there wasn't a lot to do other than get the solders right, and you have a little, anyway. That's the only one that's more exotic. XLR is fun. It's easy, fun and easy to put together. There is, by the way, on the XLR ones, I think that there is a soldering from I think it's from the 50s or 60s. It's still one of the best videos on how to solder. If you're trying to figure out how to solder, there is a great 50s or 60s video on YouTube that is about how to solder that somebody put. Maybe it was 80s. It felt like the 50s and 60s, but it was really all the little details of how to solder back when they used to. It wasn't some quick YouTube thing. It was someone who spent a lot of money on building a video, and it was well written and well organized and everything else. So I would highly recommend it if you're thinking about it. Next question.
Guy Peters in Oklahoma City says, what's your recommendation for consumer-grade teleprompters with consumer-grade cameras for a nonprofit that does small desktop productions?
Go ahead, David.
I'm a big fan. Oops, sorry about that.
Whoop, are you there? Oh, we lost you, David.
No, I'm back. Sorry. I'm a big fan of the Glide Gear TMP 100.
How big?
And then I'm sorry?
How big? How large is the teleprompter?
It holds up to a 10-inch tablet, and then I throw in a Lilliput 10-inch field monitor, and I connect that up to the Mac Mini. And then for a camera, I'm a big fan of the Sony A6400.
Rupert?
Yeah, so I recently picked up this one, which I'm really pleased with. It's a 12-inch, the TouchLate, I think it's called. It'll take either a tablet or a small monitor, and the rail that holds the tablet actually also accommodates the width of a Visa 75 mount, so you can kind of slide that in there also just fine. I'm using it with a Brio, which doesn't provide kind of the counterweight that the rig's designed, so you just want to be careful how you mount it, or mount it slightly off center because it doesn't have the weight of a bigger camera. But if you are using a bigger camera, that'd be less of a problem. And again, you can use the Lilliput or any of the smaller size monitors in there as well.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
So I'm going to take a whack at it from another thing. And teleprompters can be wonderful and can be not wonderful. And my personal feeling is that for every presenter who is enhanced and made better by a teleprompter, there are probably 10 who are made worse. And I just find that without a lot of practice and understanding how to work with these devices, it tends to make you robotic, less communicative. You know, whoever's writing the scripts for the teleprompter, most people are trained for writing for the eye, not for the ear. They do a pretty bad job. And if you're just parroting a bad script through a teleprompter, I wish to heck you would just find a different way to do it. Use bullet points or something and to cue the talent and let them talk, because there's nothing that can more robotize a good presentation than a teleprompter used poorly. So just, if you're going to use them, and they're great tools, practice, practice, practice before you foist this on the public. That's my 2 cents.
The I use the ICANN 12 inch we use for most of our kits. They're just quick and easy to throw together. They're fairly robust to make that work. And then, of course, remember, you can always build them. You can order the glass and build them, and then they get really inexpensive quickly. And the Sony cameras are pretty good for kind of a short depth of field. Next question.
James Brooks in New York says, what's a good entry-level 3D printer to get started with? Thanks.
Jeffrey.
So I have the Creality Ender 3V2. It's an open-ended printer, but it's very modular. You can put it in different firmware, the different Marlin firmware. It uses the 8020 rails, so you could actually build this out. This will do an 8x8x10 print, and then of course bringing all the add-ons, you can really beef up your prints very well. It's under $300. The other one I was considering was the one from PR USA. They have several different models and also very open-ended. But if you really want to get into it, MakerBot has these are over $1,000, but they're kind of the originals in 3D printing.
Jason?
I agree. The MakerBot is great if you're willing to play around with it a little bit. And, you know, usually the rookie mistakes are like you're not leveling your surface. You're not starting, with the right base plate, that kind of thing. Monoprice has, I think their most recent generation are not nearly as bad as the first ones.
Courtney.
I'd agree with the Ender 3V2. They're on sale today for $237 on Amazon. And I like these better because there's got support on both sides. They're all made out of aluminum. There's very little plastic parts on it. And I'd be wary of the smaller design that Jeffrey showed earlier, that's a cantilever design where it only has support from a side, because it can get a little wonky. And they have to be fairly tightly tuned to stay working.
Yeah, go ahead, Alan.
And I'm going to be controversial and not stick a filament-based one, but a resin-based one in. And I currently have this, which is the Voxel Labs Proxima, which is a resin-based one. They're better resolution, these generally, especially at the lower end here. And this one is available your side of the pond for $169 currently, delivered from Amazon. And the resin is very cheap as well.
Is this
and
a
the difference is Sorry?
Who makes that again?
Voxel Labs. It is it's a form lab. It's a form copy. And this is what I've got in the background.
And it's working well?
That one there. It's great. I paid less than that, even less than $150 for it. And it's the best print I've ever had for under $300-400. It is so good. The resolution is amazing because it is a resin one. It's 25 micron, I think it is, which is so much better. Well worth having a play with if you want to try a different technology.
Right, Jeffrey.
Yeah, it's important to note that you want to get the printer for what you want to do. If you're just creating some regular, little toys and things like that, the PLA printers are good. But if you're doing like wood or even food, they have food 3D printers out there, and you might want to look at those instead of going for the cheapest one.
Good, Courtney.
I just wanted to ask Alan, how's the smell of the resin filling your home all day, or do you become just used to it, and only when company comes over do they go, what's that smell of plastic?
Well, it doesn't fill the home because I am in my shed, as you all know, but the thing I have got washable stuff. Now this stuff, you don't need to use the alcohol to wash it, rinse it off afterwards. You literally do it under a tap, and then you cure it with a UV light.
So it still
And
requires the post processing, but just no alcohol.
Yeah, but exactly, yeah. But the thing is, I sit in here and work, and you barely notice it. It is night and day different. It is about 50% more expensive though, but well worth it when you've got a small space.
Yeah, I use the Quiddy. I think the XL is the one that I have, and super happy with it. It took me 20 minutes to put it together, and I was printing like a half an hour later, and I just make stuff all the time. I'm like, oh, I need a little something here, I need a little something there. It's been totally stable, easy to use. It's a little, as a Mac user, the interface is a little like, okay, but overall it's been great. The software on the Mac works great, and so I can slice it on my Mac, put in a key, take it down. I think it goes over the Ethernet, but I don't connect it to my network. I just put a USB key in and hit print. And it's been super successful, but now I'm really interested in the one Alan has as another one for like the smaller pieces. The biggest thing I got was I wanted to get one under $1,000 that had the largest volume and was enclosed. I have a weird thing about things being open, so I just can't. My brain doesn't want to have anything opened. So those are the requirements. It's under $1,000, enclosed, and a large space. And the Quiddy is the only one that really matched those up. Next question.
Stefan Fischer in Würzburg, Germany is up next with what teleprompter set does the panel recommend with a separate monitor, not an iPad, below 1,000 euros that is best for conversion or conversation like in office hours?
Right. So this is not for teleprompting, but more of a Teratron type thing. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I wanted to just address what Bill had said before, that I rarely will use this to actually read copy. I use this so that I can look at all of you, the camera's right behind it, and eye contact.
Yeah. Go ahead, Rupert.
Yeah, so I'm also going to kind of refer to my previous answer here. This prompter that I'm using it's sold as intended for use with a tablet, but to the right of this picture, you can see the part of the arm that extends out there and would typically clamp a tablet, but that rail itself happens to be the exact right width to sit between the set screws on a VESA 75 monitor mount. So you can just pull that out and slip your monitor right on top and use the thumb screws to use that as a rail.
Jason?
I love the prompter people, teleprompters. I have a FreeFly 24-inch that's absolutely gorgeous, but you can even get down to one of the most recent ones that they have is really small, and it's designed for a 6K and works pretty well. I think it's a 7-inch screen.
Yeah, most of ours have been prompter people, most of our teleprompters, although the ones that I'm using right now, because of just the way they fold together and their construction, have been the ICANN, because we're putting them in kits and mailing them out, and the prompter people ones didn't break down.
The ICANN kits are really nice. Like that is their gimmick, and they nail it.
Yeah, so the ICANN's really good if you want to be portable. I think prompter people is probably better if you're looking at them to be more of a permanent setup. Next question.
Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas is back with us for another question. Today is a public holiday in the United States. Can production cost more on public holidays?
Jason.
Absolutely, especially if you're using union crews. Everything costs a little bit more on a holiday. I think what you may be asking, Rupert, is that can you bill more for working on a holiday? And the answer is absolutely. And I wouldn't say it's because it's a holiday. I would just say it's, on a cost basis.
Go ahead, Bill.
I generally agree with everything that Jason just said. I will say that production, particularly on the lower levels, tends to be package kind of stuff. We're going to shoot for 10 days and here's what we're paying. It's not always time versus the amount that you make for it. So, in the team spirit of like, we're going to make a movie kind of thing, it's not uncommon for people to ignore the nature of the days and just say, we've got to do this many scenes in this many days. And for a lot of people not to care about whether they're holidays or not. That's where the art of making content and the business of making content are a little in conflict. So there are no hard and fast rules. Under union contract, hard and fast rules. And at the top end, hard and fast rules. But in the great pyramid base of production, not always those same hard and fast rules. At least that's what I found.
Go ahead, Tom. I'm not Tom. Courtney.
Yeah, union, of course, I work in a lot of union productions. You shoot on a holiday, a union holiday like today. It's double time starting at double time. So, and then it goes up from there once you go into overtime. So it can get
It's
quite
time and a half. It's time and a half of the double time.
Of the double
So
time.
that's 3x.
Exactly. Yeah.
And if you miss meal, if you get a meal penalty,
yeah,
time and a half on top, and then you get overtime on the meal penalty. Now you're in the I think that's like 7x or something like that.
But there's nothing to stop them from shooting on Sundays on a 3-day weekend. Like I had a shoot yesterday, and it was standard union straight time. Even though it's on a holiday weekend. Now, and a thing that people used to do on student productions, non-union productions, they would take advantage of these holiday weekends. They would rent their equipment on Friday for a 1-day rental and keep it for 3 days because it's a holiday. You can't take it back till the Tuesday following. And so they could get a 3 or 4 day shoot in sometime for the price of half of that.
I know for us, when we're bidding, we don't think about the holidays at all. Like we just don't even refer to them unless we're dealing with a union shop. If we're doing a union shoot, then we pay a lot of attention to where the holidays are and the times and everything else. When we're just planning a shoot, for a general production, we don't think about them, like Christmas, all Thanksgiving, whatever. You're just kind of like, okay, whatever. Next question.
Yeah, it's not Christmas. It's day 5 of the shoot schedule. Vincent Alvarez in Bellingham, Washington says, during yesterday's NASCAR race, after a crash, they took the audio from the driver. I had no expletive breaks. There was a tone covering the curse word. This happened only 15 seconds after the crash. Was that done by a superhuman or a computer or what?
So there is a delay units that are used. I think the one that I see mostly is an Everett's delay unit, where you can delay up to a minute, but usually they only delay by a couple seconds, especially in sports. So it might be 15 seconds or 10 seconds or 7-second delay is kind of the standard in radio. And we delay these, but these are video delay units. And what happens is that there's a couple different ways to do it. You can either see it ahead of time and then hit it, and you're literally hitting that. You're hitting a beep to do that, or you can actually jump to the real time. So what you do there is you literally push a button and it just jumps ahead. So if you see something bad, you'll see it just edit across it. And you'll never see it at all. In this case, it looks like they punched in, so they actually hit a tone. And so what happens is you're seeing it ahead of time, and there's a person for a large broadcast like that. That's all their job is. They're on a union scale, just sitting there waiting, and they almost never get used, but it's worth it when they're there, when it happens. And so, because they can get fined for it, if it's a standard broadcast. So yeah, there's a person sitting there with a button, and all they have to do is hit down, and that's all they do. Like that is their job, is to sit there and listen, and then they hear it, and then they hit it. They have a couple seconds to prep for it, and then they slam down on it. So anyway, that's how that works. Peter?
I was going to say, some of us are old enough to remember live television, where, particularly late night television, where that person got a workout.
Yeah, it definitely is different in the.
Johnny Carson was famous for that. Actually, Robin Williams on Johnny Carson was famous for.
And some of the folks like to do it just to work them. Like they would just do it just to have fun with the broadcasters.
Did you ever see the one where they actually used a word correctly and confused the censor? No. I won't say what it was. Let's just say they were using the correct word for a female dog, referring to a female dog on, the zoo person there.
Yeah.
And it confused the censor really badly.
Buttons, yeah. Next question.
Stefan Fischer of Würzburg, Germany is back, and he asks, why does audio and video on YouTube fall apart sometimes while watching? Isn't the audio embedded in the video? Same case on Netflix sometimes as well.
Audio is not part of the video. It's not embedded with the video. Audio comes to the player in typically in HLS, they are segments. They're two separate things that are coming into the system. So basically you have a segment of audio. So the segments are, you have a segment which might be 2 seconds long. Typically they're 2 seconds long, 2 seconds. And then you have another one that is audio. The video and audio are coming in as separate streams. Now they're kept together with the manifest. The manifest says, okay, this is what you got. This is what you got. This is what I have available. And so they're, and then you might have captions. You have all kinds of other things that could come along with it. You could have multiple audio. You could have multiple captions. And so all of those things are being delivered separately. And the reason you actually want it to be separate is because when you see them run out of sync, it's because something happened with the video that slowed it down. What you don't want is your audio to chop up, slow down, do all the things that might happen if you were losing video packets. So audio just keeps muscling through because it's a much smaller feed. It's a much smaller amount of data. So it'll just keep going and you have a nice smooth audio, and the video falls behind, then it catches back up. And so the wow and flutter, and typically on YouTube, if you watch it on a Matchbox or a Valid 8, you'll watch YouTube sync go back and forth about 45 milliseconds. It'll just be constant, almost constantly going like this. It's just sliding back and forth on a live stream. Now, once you get the VOD, it tends to be more stable. So anyway, that's the reason that those things are separate, and you want them to be separate. And it does mean that they'll fall in and out of sync on the way. The biggest problem, my biggest complaint with Netflix is the way that they handle keyframing. I'm going to ruin everybody's experience of Netflix right now. I apologize. You can close your ears or turn the volume down. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. Netflix has this weird thing where they're not handling their keyframes very well. And I think they do it to make it smaller. When you go from a close-up to a wide shot, you'll see frame loss at the wide shot. And it's just for like a second or two. You'll just see it's like this weird, like, as it goes through, and it happens very commonly on Netflix. And that's why I don't watch films on Netflix. Like I watch comedians, and I watch documentaries, and I watch other things on Netflix. I won't watch any of their narratives because of this problem they have with the close-up to the wide and dropping frames. Next question.
Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas is up next with what methods or tools can be recommended for scheduling and recording routine maintenance and testing, like battery replacements, filter changes, failover testing, or anything that needs to be completed and recorded on a routine basis.
Go ahead, Alan.
So one way I've done it with my old lighting rigs was using Google Forms and Google Sheets. Forms for the nice pretty interface, and then the log and everything was kept in Sheets. It's very entry level while you're looking, and now I use a part of my CRM system has all the asset management and testing built into it as well. Quite a few CRM systems have it now, and not all, and several of them are free as well if you're looking for an enterprise level thing, but on a no budget.
Go, Jason.
Google Sheets does a really good job of this. A while ago, for my own personal studio, I set up a series of text expander snippets that allow to call Apple scripts that will basically allow me to paste these things through and then, very quickly turn out a PDF if I ever need to. It's probably more work, and I bet there's a more direct way to do it, but that was what I needed at the time.
Good, Bill.
Everybody has their own system. I used to use, when we were doing a lot of production out of offices and kind of daily stuff, the maintenance list I put into red, yellow, and green little categories. Green was stuff that needed to be maintained all the time, and so it was a regular once a week. We'd go through and do those battery changes and things like that. Yellow was slightly longer time frame. The red list was the most interesting because I would do things like put the button battery in the cameras that last for 5 years on that red list, and then I'd make sure that 5 years from now, I'd have a red dot to say, check through the red list things. And if one of those was tagged as 5 years ago, we'll change it out now, even if it's still working fine. So it's how you decide to manage things. But if you're in production, regular maintenance is your lifeblood. Getting out in the field and having a piece of gear that you're relying on to get the client's job done fail is just not acceptable.
All right. When we had a warehouse, we had, I don't know how the schedule was managed. Someone did it because we definitely had tests that were constantly going on. And a lot of it, because things went out, they would come back and get tested so there were things were getting tested all the time. I know now that things are smaller and I don't have to do quite so much. I actually use iCal. While I'm doing it, I say, Siri, remind me. And I'm not going to finish anything because I just told Siri to do something. So, or I'll put it into iCal just manually, but I put it in really quickly. And it just puts it way out, 3 months out, 1 month out, whatever. I do that even with my water filters, at home, for my whatever. And I just say and then the alarm goes off and I do it. I will admit that my entire life, and this is a tip if you ever want to meet with me, is to send me a calendar event, because I have had people send me calendar events and I show up, I don't even know who they are. Like, I don't remember. Like, and they just send me a calendar event, and I just show up. I'm like, I don't know what we're talking about. I just know that I have a calendar event to talk to you. So my whole life just revolves around calendar events. I probably shouldn't have said that on YouTube, and people start sending me calendar events. And so anyway, yeah. So I my whole life revolves around calendar events. But if you do that to me after watching this on YouTube, and it's just random, I'll never meet with you again. Just, so don't do that. All right, go ahead, Peter.
I was going to say, ignoring the fact that in my world where I manage data centers, there are, for lack of a better term, industrial strength asset management systems that you need to use to pass audit. That's not what we're talking about here. I use OmniFocus. I got into OmniFocus much the same way you did, because it then integrates into my calendar and tells me things that I need to do. But I have Bill, I have the analog to your 3 lists in OmniFocus, and I add things in, and when I have to do things, and magically appears on my calendar, time to change the batteries on the smoke detectors, because it's not just my gear in my home office, it's everything in my house.
Yeah. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael says, currently I have a 3.5 gigahertz 6-core Mac Pro from 2013, the trash can model. Apple has a very good deal on a 3.5 gigahertz 8-core Mac Pro from 2019, but jumping to 12 cores would be $3,000 more. Would that be worth it if possible for audio specifically?
Go ahead, Ken.
If you could wait, I would. I think you'll see some more deals coming on the iMac Pros when the new M versions of those get built. If you can wait, I would wait rather than buying anything Intel based. The M chips are just miraculous. So I would wait if you can.
Go ahead, Leo.
So there's 2 things on this. The first thing is, as Ken has said, the way it's going is the Intel chipsets on Apple will be obsolete eventually. So anything you buy now will not. You've got 8 years out of this current machine. If you buy a machine with Intel now, you won't get 8 years out of it. They'll have turned the operating system off, I suspect, by that time. So that's going to be the first thing. The second thing is actually back to what you're asking about, which is the 12 cores and audio. Audio doesn't, and a lot of things don't run that well on multiple cores, or they don't use multiple cores. The way that it's actually incredibly difficult to program when you get over about 4 cores, and human beings can't actually write code that works that well over more than 4 cores. So you end up with something, with an application not being able to use more than half of what the actual processing is. It's not all the case, but in a lot of cases, that's the case.
The problem with audio in general is that the audio manufacturers and software developers are just way behind. And so you probably could buy an Intel now, because if you get an M1, you're gonna have compatibility issues for at least another 2 years. And so that's gonna be the real problem with this. So the Intel probably, in this one case, probably makes some sense. But I would probably recommend external DSPs as opposed to trying to put more cores in. If I was gonna choose where I spent the money, I would get external digital signal processing than trying to build up a more internal processing, because they're really just built to do the thing. So that'll extend your computer's capability a little bit more. Next question. Jason, real quick.
You kind of nailed it. I would say, get something from Sound Devices.
Well, for DSP though, I think what you want is something
for DSP, yeah.
Yeah,
I wouldn't even think twice about it. If you've never owned an M1 Mac, I understand what Alex said is absolutely correct. It really is all just going to depend on what you need this specific device for. But no, please don't spend very much money, at least not, for the next week or 2.
And generally, I don't buy any hardware that I don't think is going to pay off in 6 months to a year. Like, I just don't buy I rent it. If I don't think it's going to pay off that fast, I won't buy it. 2 years is on the outer edge. Like, it has to pay off in 2 years. And so then once it's paid off, I just go, well, buy another one. So I don't expect my technology to last more than 2 years typically. Now, I keep a lot of my computers around. I use them for other things, but whatever I'm using for work is usually less than 2 years old. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael says in an article about production crews returning to on-site work, mentions that, quote, in-person connection helps with communication and timing. Latency issues aside, could a well-run distributed group like ours, see the Belfast Method, be just as cohesive?
Go ahead, Leo.
So yes, it can be. The big thing that we're talking about here is human connectivity between people, and human connectivity does work better in the room or over time. And time is the big issue. The reason it's working so well, I mean, if we'd launched Belfast week 3 of office hours, I'd say it wouldn't have gone very well. And it wasn't until we actually understood what the skill set of people are, and you only do that by spending a lot of time with people, that you understand where their strengths and weaknesses are. And I think that's where, yes, it can, but it's about time.
Go ahead, David.
From a production standpoint, I would argue that I do better work when I'm not distracted by other people, when I'm in a space where I can really focus on my task, obviously with appropriate communications devices so that we can still keep those lines of communication open. But I find that especially using Zoom and tools like this, that if I don't need to be on site and I can still work cohesively with my team, I'm more focused when I'm off site.
Good, Courtney.
I worked yesterday on a full union production, which is the first time I've done it since COVID, and we're under the union rules as far as operating on set. So everybody must be masks. They have A group, B group, C group, and we're shooting in a house with a 60-person crew. And I can't tell you how set discipline has degraded under this situation, because everyone's wearing masks. They have to talk louder. And so when you're trying to shoot, there's 15 conversations going on in 3 different rooms, and you can't keep the set quiet. It's just kind of a nightmare. And I think, remote production solves that problem, because, people are in their separate little rooms and can keep their mics muted, and they can have a conversation without everybody else in the room hearing them. And so it's, although, and I've been shooting on sets for 40 years or so, but coming back with these new protocols, it is just a hazard to try and keep the set under control.
Yeah, Bill.
I think it's going to settle itself out. I think there's a lot of work in this industry where proximity to the person in person just doesn't matter much at all. And I'm thinking of you look at a television station picture from anywhere in the last 20 years, you've got a whole bunch of individuals sitting at very complicated panels of buttons and switches, and none of them are looking at each other. They're all focused on the job at hand, and they're getting their communication and directing through audio, and they're doing their job. Where that is on the planet doesn't matter at all in my thinking. Now, there are some jobs where proximity and closeness, obviously a floor director must be adjacent to the talent in order to direct them properly. You can do some of that with lights and things, but really that some people on the set, it makes perfect sense to have them be there in physical presence. But I think these jobs are going to separate down to what's reasonable to do electronically and what needs to be done in person. And we're just going to change things. That's the way it's going to happen, I think.
People in physical production are desperate to keep it physical. and they're like people who rode horses are like this newfangled cars, and we have to have that's never going to work, or it makes all this noise and it can't go over, it has to have a road, and it has to have a thing, and they'll talk about all those things, but eventually the horses just got replaced, and we still have them. Horses didn't go away. We just ride them for fun for the most part, and there's still places where you still use them. But I think in the same way that people will talk about things that this is the way it has to be, and it's just the way that it has to be for them, or they're trying to justify their existence. And so the future is going to be, again, not the future, but a future is going to be 50, 60, 70% of events will be online within the next decade. They just won't be anywhere, because it's a superior scaling and management system. It's an invasive species. It is going to run everything else over. And there'll be other things that are there. It doesn't mean that physical events will go away, but they're not going to be the big game. And COVID launched us 10 years into the future, but most of us working in events knew that this was going to happen. It's just happening a lot faster than we expected it to. Next question.
Eric Price in Kansas City, Kansas, or Missouri. Are there markings printed on the outer sheathing of HDMI cables to indicate whether they are passive or active?
Go, Jason.
No.
Yes, there you go, Rupert.
I mean, good quality ones there should be. Quite often there might be, but quite often there won't be. But also bear in mind that if they're homegrown cables, you may get a marking on the cable, but that may not necessarily tell you how that cable has been terminated or what truly is on either end.
Yeah, in this case, if it doesn't bat 1,000, the answer is no. Like, that's my feeling on the matter.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, and usually you'll find out the skinnier HDMI cables like this one here all require some type of active equalization. And I don't know if you can see it. The only indication there is just this. I can't get it to, maybe if I hide my eyes. There is that little chevron.
Yeah.
Oh, it does say source on it. And I had to highlight that in white, but it's printed in black. So they will say source, and you're usually unidirectional. So that'll be a good, if they're unidirectional, it's an indication that it's an active cable. And if it's got a really skinny wire.
Next question.
Rupert McCrae in Dallas, Texas, up next with what cybersecurity blogs or YouTube channels does the panel recommend?
Ken.
Security Now, Steve Gibson on the twit.tv network, and it follows MacBreak Weekly.
Yeah. Jason.
Krebs on security is always excellent. Just understanding, and again, nobody gets it right all the time. And at the end of the day, Krebs on security, if I were to mention one, is pretty good. I absolutely adore Security Now. Steve Gibson is one of the most thorough guys in the industry, and consistent. But yeah, those two I think they take the prize.
Alan.
And if you're the mere mortal end of the scale where you're interested but don't quite know that much, I find this guy, he was more of a networking. But he does cover a lot of, it says Network Chuck, he covers lots of everything, and there's a whole series there on networking security. He's got the CCNA thing, which then covers a lot of it. And if you just want general news and stuff from the UK, you've got the Register, and their security blog covers everything. And it's more of a journal than a blog, but there we go.
That's great. Next question.
Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana is up next with I wear glasses and would love to experiment with AR. Are there any wearables the panel would recommend?
Glass. Still out there. Glass is a pretty mature solution now in an industrial area. So, Google stopped doing them for consumers, but as far as a wearable goes, they're actually pretty good. If I was experimenting with AR, though, I would probably experiment with the iPhone. The iPhone right now with LiDAR it's the gold standard at the moment for AR because of the LiDAR. And what's crazy is that Google was way ahead. We had LiDAR Google phones 5 years ago, but Google ended that program. And because of that, the LiDAR gives you scale and really hard tracking. And I think that it's by far the best. And then the integration with the iPhone is super easy because you can just click on it. Literally, you can text someone a USDZ. They can tap on it. It just appears in front of them. And it's pretty amazing. Go ahead, Courtney.
And if you got a couple of grand to drop, HoloLens, which has been on the market for several years now, is good portable wireless technology. And it has diopters to adjust for your eyesight if you wear glasses.
I want to correct myself. The HoloLens is a superior product to the glass as far as how far it's gotten, and especially in certain areas like AEC, architectural engineering and construction. Some of the stuff that they've done in that kind of industrial space has been amazing. So Microsoft has really taken that to a pretty high level. I'm mostly familiar with glass because I got it very early on, but the HoloLens has gone a long way in doing those things. But those aren't really experiments. I mean, you're really spending real money at that point. But right now, the phone is the easiest thing to pick up and just see it working. Next question.
Mark Giuliani here on the panel and from Alexandria, Virginia, says, I am looking for a new HDR monitor. I've noticed different types of syncs. 2 of them are AMD FreeSync and NVIDIA's G-Sync. What's the value of this technology? Oops, you're muted, Alex.
I don't know how I got muted there. I didn't remember muting myself. Anyway, so I do not know. That's what I said before. I don't know the difference. Go ahead, Jason.
This really comes down to a lot of things that are going to matter. About 2% for about 0.5% of the population that can actually differentiate, and that is from the very top to the very bottom. Let's just say FreeSync allows AMD cards or ATI cards to sync and not give tearing on very specific video games under very specific circumstances. NVIDIA's G-Sync does basically the same thing. That's the point, and that's basically it.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, Jason covered it pretty well. It's mainly for gamers because it syncs the vertical blanking with the frame rate of the game itself. So it just, you don't see tearing. You don't see a transition from one frame to another frame anywhere within the frame. So, and it takes a fairly fast processor to process those images at 60 to 120 frames per second and stay in sync.
Go ahead, Alan.
And I will find the video from Linus Tech Tips, which talks exactly about this subject. He covered it really well. It's about 10 minutes. It's several years old now, but there is one. I'll try and find it and stick it in Mukana.
Things are going to get a little trickier as we move to high frame rate, and we're moving to high frame rate. so the thing is that the other thing to kind of, when you think about things that are inevitable, an enormous amount of content in the next 10 years will be at 120 frames a second. The games are moving there quickly. Video is going to start moving there over the next year. There's been R&D on this for the last 5 years. So this isn't new to those of us who have been doing the R&D, but it's coming in a big way. Every TV that you buy now is 120 frames a second, and most devices are 120 frames a second. And so we're almost at critical mass. And so you're going to see a high frame rate coming. So you just want to keep your eye on it. That's the real value of like something like the Blackmagic 12K is not so much that it does 12K, it's that it does 8K at 120 frames per second. Next question.
Mark Giuliani is done. Ashadev is next in New York City. A guest invited to speak for a nonprofit meetup, it's a non-paid gig for a Zoom webinar, is saying that Zoom sessions cannot be made available on YouTube. Is this industry practice? Any other options I can explore for this situation?
Go ahead, Leo.
Yeah, so I see this quite often, particularly if people are used to speaking in events where they charge for their stuff, but they want to give a free session. So there may be a coach, or I also have this with DJs, and they want it taken down or they don't want it out on YouTube. It does cause a lot of problems when you have actually said that we're going to be using this and we're going to be distributing it in various different places. A lot of it comes back down to the fact that there is a thought in their head that it's going to be on YouTube and it's going to be there forever. Personally, anybody who wants to watch something and wants to record it probably knows how to record it anyway, because everything that you send to anybody, even on here, can be screen scraped. So there is always a way around it. But I have seen this, and yes, it's a pain. The way I get around it on certain things is we will use other platforms which are not YouTube, e.g. Vimeo on a private link, or we will use Dailymotion.
Rupert.
Yeah, there can also be, governance or IP-based governance reasons or compliance reasons that somebody or some organization may not want their content on YouTube. And that's just you have to work through that and look at whether it's what that limitation is. But you can also look at the Zoom's own web cloud recording sharing system. That will give you maybe some reporting, maybe some compliance checkboxes there that might meet your requirement.
Yeah, I was notorious for when I did speaking events in person to not let anyone record, no cameras, and that had nothing to do. It had to do with the fact that I used to speak while I was working at ILM, and I notoriously would say the wrong thing somewhere, and so I would get in trouble. And so then I was like, nope, nobody can record it because I don't want it showing up somewhere. But I've relaxed because I don't do in-person events anymore. Like I've literally started turning them down. I'm just like, hey, if you're doing it virtually, I'll show up, or if you want me to put me on a screen, I'll show up, but I won't travel to speak anymore. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael says the inspiration for all civilian space mission is going to be using Apple Watches and iPhones, iPads for health research studies. Wouldn't those consumer devices not be rated for use in space? And wouldn't the iPhone not be happy without a network?
Go ahead, Peter.
Well, who says they don't have a network? First of all, I mean, we know that, NASA several years ago implemented, in conjunction with the Internet Engineering Task Force, something called DTN, which is their method for handling TCP over high latency networks, because they also use that same protocol to talk to the Mars rover, which if you want to have a latency problem, let's talk minutes, right? So they have that. Now, as far as they'll have a network. Now, they're not using these phones and devices for command and control. Those have to be hardened for solar radiation and things like that. This is experiment stuff. If it works, it works. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But it would have to be a solar flare that would fry a phone, probably would hurt a person too. So
go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, for monitoring vital signs and things like that, I think it would perfectly fine, because the watches and the phones communicate over Bluetooth, so it's just a local radio transmission, and anything that's on your wrist, the only thing that's different is gravity. Otherwise, you're in a breathable atmosphere, and anything that would kill you would probably kill the watch. So take that into account. And the other thing is that monitoring things like blood pressure are difficult to do with just the sensor on your wrist. And they're getting an approximation of blood pressure now, but I don't think it's got any kind of medical approval as a medical device. It's for entertainment purposes only.
Good, Bill.
Well, we've known, because they announced it a long time ago, that Apple is extraordinarily interested in health monitoring as a part of their long-term plans. And so pulse ox, heart rate, those things are undoubtedly on their radar. And I just have to believe that no matter what the barriers for a regular person or a regular company might be, if Tim Cook calls your technology startup and says, I'd like to have a chat with you about this, and that probably extends into government, he can probably get the meeting pretty fast and work around and say, here are the limitations that we're working within. We won't mess up what your regulations require, but we'd like to test this stuff for the idea of future products. I'm pretty sure he's going to get a yes back for that.
Yeah, I think that, sample frequency is really important. So the accuracy is probably less important, as the fact that it's on your wrist all the time and they can sample it all the time. And it gives you an enormous amount of data that is useful from a health perspective. Next question.
Moving on to Robert Soji in Los Angeles. He says, other than Apple, any recommendations for a Lightning to HDMI adapter?
Go ahead, Ken.
I might have said a month ago, yes, I've got one here that works reasonably well, but it doesn't anymore. There is no alternative. It is only the Apple one. Don't waste your money.
I have bought so many. This is the buy one, cry ones. Don't even bother. Like it is such a nightmare to get a Lightning. I have all these little cables that do Lightning, and they're all wonky, and they all stop working, and I don't know what it is about them, but it's not. And the reason I was doing it was because I wanted a long feed. I don't want the little adapter sticking right out of the phone. But I have not found one that is consistently, I don't think any of us have, that consistently works with the Lightning. There's plenty of them for USB-C for the iPad, but the iPhone and the Lightning, it's just a dead end. Next question.
Aftermarket ones are great for macrame, though. Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas says, a movie buff in the UK just rescued 20,000 VH tapes from a landfill. He's reported to say that VHS is starting to have a similar comeback as seen on vinyl. Do we believe a similar comeback is possible?
Leo.
Well, if I had 20,000 tapes and I wanted to make my market go up, I'd say it's coming back. No. It degrades.
Sorry.
It goes. It's awful.
Awful format.
And it's just no. Anything you've got on, being serious, anything you've got on VHS that you treasure, get it off VHS soon, because it will be, you'll come to find it isn't there anymore.
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, just to echo Leo's point, it's not comparable with vinyl. Vinyl, what doesn't have the issues that tape has, but these tapes will make a comeback. So no, I've got a tape here which has got some memories on, but yeah, it's tape. It's not it's not comparison to a vinyl.
Yeah, Alan.
I'd just like to add, he wasn't a film buff. He ran a shop that sold and rented VHSs. so the article was a little bit. It's sort of true, but at the same time not. And an exact same thing is degrading. I know, because my dad has just sent me a box of about 50 VHSs of mine and my 5 siblings' childhood, which he says, please get these digital. So that's what I'm going to be doing over the next month, because they are going.
Yeah, Courtney.
I don't think there will be a resurgence because the transports themselves are not made anymore, and there's thousands of them out there, but keeping them working is a bit of a task. And the format itself, like you said, like everyone said, the tape degrades and flakes after a while, and getting it to playback is a disaster. And there's no reason to. You're not going to gain in resolution, only in nostalgia. And you can apply a filter in any editing package that'll make it look like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Robert Soji in Los Angeles is up next with any recommendations for a simple and cost-effective key and fill light setup for Zoom meetings.
Go ahead, David.
I'm not sure how cost-effective it is, but I'm a big fan of the Elgato key light, which runs for about $200. It's you can control the temperature, control the intensity from an app or your computer. And if you're looking for something a little cheaper, the key light Air is $129. What I love about these is that they attach right to my standing desk. They go up and down with me. They don't take up a huge amount of space.
Bill?
It used to be hard to find inexpensive lighting that was really good for video. That has changed a lot. So now the inexpensive panel lights that you find on Amazon, even at $20 or $30 a piece, are pretty decent. Look for a color rendering index that is reasonably high, 95 or above if you can get it. And make sure that you just test one of that type before you order a bunch, and make sure it doesn't have some weird green spike in it. But other than that, there are a lot of things that are a lot better than they used to be. It's not as hard to find good lighting.
Go ahead, Peter.
I would second David's recommendation with the added point that I can control them through Companion on my Stream Deck. So it's one button to turn them all on and change the colors and turn them off.
Next question.
Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana is up next with what's the panel's recommendation for a 360-degree camera or a Pro VR 180 camera, $1,000 or less preferred?
Go ahead, Jason.
I have not stayed current on this, but I really liked the high-end Theta. I think you had one too, Alex. The one that was right around $1,000 was just spectacular.
All around.
So the Ricoh Theta is the answer.
All around, I think the Ricoh at that under $1,000. I think the Ricoh Theta is it's just so easy. You carry it around in your bag. You just pull it out and I do a lot of. I've taken thousands of photos with Thetas. All of my site surveys, I don't shoot as much video with it, but you can. It's not going to be stereo. It's only going to be monoscopic, but it's pretty high res and super easy to use. I will say the only final recommendation is if you're shooting 360 from the hood of a car, make sure to set the fin like a fin, not like a sail. The quarter 20, the quarter 20 at the bottom will fail somewhere between 55 and 60 miles an hour. Not that it's ever happened to me or not. And then it bounces off the car, and you go back and go, well, at least I can try to get the memory off of it. It's still in one piece. It's all scratched up and everything else. And then a construction truck runs over it, and all there is pieces. So anyway, it was a sad day. Anyway, next question.
Oops. Douglas Carmichael's next with what would the panel recommend for equipment cooling systems? I know ProCool makes rack fans, but has anyone ever used fans or AC units in a rack?
Go ahead, Leo.
Okay, so the majority of racks are actually built for data centers. Data centers, a 1U rack, a 1U fans are really noisy. If you've ever lived or have to spend any of your life in a data center, you will have lots of these earplugs because it is so noisy. So all of these ones which are really designed for that are noisy. And if you look at the decibel output of most of those ones, they're really high. The way around it is to have something that's 2 or 3U, and once you get up to 5 or 6 inches on a fan, the cooling distance, the cooling amount is much better for the noise. But you've just gone and lost 3U of your rack on fans, so it's a big thing. The other way that you do it is you put them in the top, and you can get really large diameter fans that sit in the top and go down. But watch the noise. If you're going to have to live with this thing, you're going to regret it.
Go ahead, Rupert.
Yeah, so for cooling rack equipment, it's all about airflow. You need a way for the heat to exhaust and for the fresh air to get in, and for that flow to be as uninterrupted as possible through the rack. So your cable management becomes really critical. You really want to draw cold air in, fresh air, either from, or ambient air from the bottom, the front, and exhaust it through the back or the top. And so if you are putting rack mount fans in between, obviously you don't want to put them in between rack mount equipment, because you're just bouncing air, between those pieces of equipment. You want to, if there's open space in the middle of the rack, that's fine, because that'll form part of your draw through. But don't obstruct either the output on the top if you've got vents on the top, or clutter around the bottom to prevent the fresh air coming in. Now you can air condition these racks. APC do a lot of racks with integrated cooling. You just got to be really careful with that, because you're getting into then either refrigerant or chilled water, and you've got condensate problems and all kinds of things like that. But there are some products that have it integrated. I wouldn't go trying to invent my own solution there, though.
Good. Bill, and then Peter real quick.
If you don't have a ton of money, also look into the fact that I do a lot of voice booth stuff, and I've always air conditioned my own voice booths. And I discovered that there is an entire industry out there that grows things. I'm not going to say what they grow, but because of that, inline air handling systems that are very small scale, 4-inch, 5-inch, 6-inch conduit, in and out air handling that moves a lot of air silently, those things are now mass produced. And I have used them with great success in voice booths to vent them. And they're silent, and they move a lot of air real fast, and they're cheap.
I like the way you weeded through that answer.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Peter.
Excuse me, just for a second. Rupert hit at the end where Rupert hit the point. I mean, particularly in the data centers these days, you can get, frankly, chillers for racks. That means, so you're pumping water through a radiator in the back and keeping it cool this way. So we've gone back to water cooled technology in some cases, particularly in the larger data centers. The other thing that we've had great success with, we converted what was a clean room for a satellite manufacturer into a data center. And imagine what laminar flow does if you just leave the covers off the racks.
Right. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael says the Illinois State Board of Education has restricted school districts from offering virtual learning unless the student is, quote, medically fragile. Do you think this is about employing more workers or real educational advantages?
Go ahead, David.
I live in Florida, so it's possible that I'm jaded, but if I had to guess, I would say this is more political than anything else.
It's business. We could call it political, but the problem really is that we're dealing with a lot of schools and working with them, and it is virtual schools terrify so the physical infrastructure can't lose very many students because you're paying cafeteria workers, you're paying janitors, you're paying for the infrastructure, you're paying electricity, you're paying all these things in a physical infrastructure. If you lose about 10 or 15% of the students, the whole system will collapse. 30% of the parents are requesting virtual. So there's a problem here, a demand and supply problem. And so the problem is that if virtual schools start to work, it'll destroy the entire public school system right now, because they don't have a way to manage the money. And worse for them is if it becomes a statewide or national, it no longer is a district by district funding. And these K through 12, .orgs and, the schools that are now providing this, are a clear and present danger to public school systems. I mean, that's the reality, is they just don't have a financial model to make it work. And we see this in many businesses where you just don't have a financial model to do the thing, to compete in the area, and they don't have a way to do it. So they're trying to hold it back. Most likely the next year is when the crack will hit, and it's going to be big. So the crack is going to hit next year, where things start to really fall apart. And so over the next decade, you're going to see a disruption like we've never seen before, because there's $1 trillion sitting, that's basically waiting, to be expressed there. So it's a huge amount of money. It's bigger than oil. So there's a lot of startups that are focused on it right now. And so, but the public school systems are trying to hold it back because they can't have it be successful because they can't compete with it in a physical environment. And so they're, it doesn't work right now. It's all broken. Keep it that way is the goal, or to keep it that way long enough to figure out how to make it work. And they just haven't figured it out yet. Next question.
Thanks for that, Alex. That was really interesting.
We talk about this, by the way, we talk about this all the time on in the education hour. So the reason, this is all we talk about on Saturday when we don't stream it to YouTube. So that's little hint of, if you're a teacher listening to it, that's all we're talking about. So it's come up in a lot of conversations. Next question.
I find it really interesting. Next up, Douglas Carmichael. How much of the adjustment would be going? How much of an adjustment would it be going from the Belfast Method environment with an Atem to a larger switchers like a Grass Valley Group K-frame or a Sony XVS?
It'd be extremely difficult because the protocols aren't there. So the protocols aren't as opened, and the APIs aren't there, and all that stuff that you need to make this really seamless and easy to do. It would be very hard on the larger systems. And so they have their own ways of doing this, but it's not as easy and opened. And that's going to be a problem for them. Next question.
Right, Peters in Oklahoma City is next. And he says, can you recommend an entry-level production script template for a small podcast?
Go ahead, Jason.
Short answer is no, not off the top of my head. Ulysses works really well for this.
Next question.
I guess it's for me. It says, Bill seems to be out of sync today. Do others recognize this as well? I do. It's driving me nuts. And I think this is a neighborhood change they've made somewhere. It started about 5 days ago, and I'm about to burn up some telephone lines to AT&T fiber about why in the world did this suddenly change and go south on me.
Next question.
Michael Douglas is up next in a discussion about electronic
Douglas
music.
Carmichael, I think. Douglas, I don't know.
Oh, Douglas Carmichael.
Not Michael Douglas. He's an actor. Yeah, exactly. Go ahead, Douglas Carmichael. Go ahead.
Be interesting if Michael Douglas was here. But anyway, in a discussion about an electronic music festival, I mentioned most electronic acts send 2 stereo stems to front of house, one for the audience and one for the monitors, and a mic to address the crowd. Given acoustic spaces vary, wouldn't more control be better?
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
Having shot many of these shows and having been on the stage and been the guy, doing the DJing for many more, short answer is, at that volume, it doesn't really matter. The whole thing is just going to be limited. It's going to be brought in with multiple channels, and basically everything else is going to be done independently of the way that the stage is configured. So it really doesn't matter.
As spatial becomes a bigger deal, this is actually one of the reasons people are going to move more towards, I think, theater distribution as well as individual distribution of concerts, is because once you hear a concert in 5.1, it's an entirely different experience, and you're going to then suddenly get to live spaces, and you're not going to, where the band is actually there, and it's not going to be the same experience. And at some point that starts to break down. Next question.
Rupert McCrae is up next, and he says, in a recent blog post, Blue Jeans has outlined its essential guide to hosting a live product deminar. They define this as a product demonstration in the style of a webinar. Are they trying to coin a new phrase, or has anyone heard this before? I sure hadn't.
They're making something up. We're all making stuff up. It's brand new. They're trying to. I think a lot of people are trying to get away from the word webinar because it has such a bad connotation, and unfortunately, giving it a new name doesn't make it less boring. I mean, a demo online without lots of conversation isn't. So if they do that, then that's great. But most of the deminars that I've seen have not been great. Next question. We're almost out of time.
Next question, McCrae in Dallas, Texas. Light bulb inventor Thomas Edison said, "I haven't failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." Who are your favorite inventors or their famous quotes?
Go ahead, Leo.
So I'm going to take it slightly differently. He was a sort of inventor, and I'm going to say, man plans and God laughs.
Go ahead, David.
I don't have an inventor as much as I just want to share that I used to be on the board of the Brain Tumor Society, and we would give thousands and thousands of dollars to researchers to try and find a cure for brain tumors. And every single year they came back and they had not found a cure for brain tumors, but we kept giving them money. And that's because every time they failed, that was yet another route that we knew, don't go down that way anymore.
Yeah, Peter.
Well, oddly enough, David and I didn't plan this, but my favorite quote is from 1938 Nobel laureate in physics, Enrico Fermi, who said, "Many a great theory has been ruined by a harsh reality."
Yeah.
Which was a perfect follow on to what you just said, David.
Yeah, Jason.
Samuel Richardson, necessity may well be called the mother of invention, but calamity is the test of integrity. I love that.
Yeah, go ahead, Ken.
I can't, I've got a few quotes and I can't recall who the inventor was, but the ones I like best are, you don't measure what matters, what you measure becomes what matters. And action equals possibility greater than circumstance. Or what I love is good enough is the enemy of great. And I'm not sure who said that.
I don't know. I think that philosopher is crazy. You know, like I don't know. I don't know if I would listen to anything he says. Go ahead, Alan.
See, for me, one of my favorite inventors is a man called Tim Berners-Lee, who invented the World Wide Web, which we sort of made our modern world usable. And he had a quote. Hang on, let me see if I can find it. And it is, "You affect the world by what you browse." And I always had the ... on the family computer.
That's good. Courtney?
I don't have any famous quotes from him, but Dean Kamen is probably a favorite inventor of mine. He has over 1,000 patents, invented the Segway and the Stirling electricity generator, and a lot of other things to help people. And I think as far as quotes go, I think Murphy holds the record for Murphy's law, and the law of selective gravitation. The drop tool will always fall where it does the most damage.
My favorite inventor is Nikola Tesla, which I share a birthday with, and so I've grown up a big Tesla fan, and I think that one of the quotes that he has, it's pretty good, is the scientists of today think deeply instead of clearly. One must be sane to think clearly, but one can think deeply and be quite insane. You know, so I think about that. You know, and another friend of mine that works at a big company, one of them is my favorite quotes is not an inventor, but someone I work with, and he said, "We are production people. We do not have the luxury to be philosophical." So anyway, go ahead, Jason.
I caught myself the other day telling a client this, and I'm sure it's a quote from somewhere, but it came from my mouth most recently. The best way to predict the future is to invent it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. John, who has that bill? And
this is a $1 bill in Serbia. He's on the $1 bill in Serbia.
Dang, now, but I need one of those. All right.
I got one for you. I have an extra.
Okay. All right. All right. Thanks. All right.
You can use those to buy your Tesla.
Yeah, that would be great. Is to have 100,000 or 50,000 of those $1 bills and just come with a box full of $1. Oh my gosh, that'd be a great YouTube segment. Anyway, like put it through one of those counters and get them all in little stacks and just buy a Tesla with Teslas. Anyway, that must be done now. All right. It's a great conversation. Good Labor Day for us in America. Good Labor Day. I like the 2 hour every once in a while. Just kind of cruising through lots of questions. We now know how many questions we answer. 51 today. 52 actually with the last question. So 52 questions today. So that's we have found that the new system, in addition to not making people hold up their hand forever, the intensity of the quickness that we got this system built was directly related to me not hosting and sitting there going like this, just going, I can't believe I made all these panelists do this for so long. This is insane. So anyways, so I just want to apologize. Moo, moo, moo. Anyway, so I apologize for making you do that, but the question velocity has increased by our count by about 10 questions per show. When we have it's a little different when we have 2 hour sections. So, but that's the one you can kind of get because it's just a little bit faster. There's not quite as much dead space. So it's really interesting. Anyway, great set of questions from our producers. You guys, You people make it work every day, 7 days a week. It's amazing. And then thanks to the panelists for the great answers, great conversation. It's always good to see all of you. And tomorrow we'll be talking about mic placement. We all have opinions. Some of them are good. so we'll talk about them and we'll work through those things. Yeah, absolutely. So we'll talk about mic placement tomorrow. But right now, for the next 21 hours, we'll go into after hours. All right, see you there.